Is your child behind in reading? How would you know? And how do you define behind? Behind what? Behind all the other kids that are 6 years old or 7 years old? Does your child need to be at the same spot as all the other 6 year olds? Let's talk about that today. You know, if you had a baby at the same time as your neighbor had a baby, and your neighbor's baby started walking when they were only 9 months old, would you be worried if your baby wasn't? No, you wouldn't be. Even if your baby was like 12 months old and they still weren't walking, you would probably not worry about that. Because we know that kids walk and there's a range of ages at which your baby might start walking. And we don't worry if our baby starts walking 3 months later than the neighbor kid. But if your kid was like 2 years old and they still weren't walking, then you'd probably start to get worried, wouldn't you? So let's think about reading. I mean, it's the same way. We know that reading can be, there's a range of ages during which somebody can start reading. And maybe we don't need to worry if our kid doesn't read as well as some of the other kids that are also 6 years old. However, we do know that just like with walking, by the time that you're 2 years old, you should be walking. And you should really talk to the doctor if they're not. And with reading, it's the same way. There is a range, and it's true that your kid doesn't have to be the same as the next door neighbor, but there is a range, and there is such a thing as dyslexia. And dyslexia is not just being a late bloomer and learning a little bit later. And they do need some extra help. So let's talk about what some of the warning signs are for a child that has dyslexia. What are the warning signs? How can you tell if maybe that's something that might be happening in your family? So let me tell you, I have a dyslexic child that by the time, if I had known what I know now, when she was just little, I mean before school age, like 3 years old, I would have already been suspicious that she was dyslexic. I would have already known that there was something that maybe she would need some extra help with reading. And these are the warning signs that we did have in our family, but I didn't know they were warning signs, and I didn't know that I should realize that maybe she was going to need some extra help in reading at the time. These are them. I'm going to let you know what they are so you can know if you have those warning signs, and if you have noticed them ever since, preschool age, and now we're struggling with reading, then you can know, wait a minute, maybe this isn't just a late bloomer, maybe it's dyslexia. So here's the warning signs. Delayed speech is one thing, or prolonged baby talk, mispronouncing words for longer than most children do, and not understanding rhyming, not knowing if a word rhymes or not, or not being able to produce a rhyme. And also, I meant to say this first, but hereditary. I mean, if are people in your family who are poor readers, they don't like to read, they had a hard time in school, they struggled in school, they're very poor spellers, even if they're very successful now, they may be dyslexic. And dyslexia is hereditary, so it doesn't mean that your child necessarily has dyslexia, but they're more likely to struggle with dyslexia if there's other people in the family that did. So, okay, so those are warning signs that from before your child ever even starts to learn the alphabet, that you can know that, maybe they might be dyslexic. And so that is just something to keep in mind. And I wanted to say that when we're thinking about whether our kid is behind in reading or not, let's think about whether they're going to school or whether they're homeschooling. Because I think that if you're homeschooling, you have a little more leeway to wait and not be as worried about it or not work as hard on it until they're a little bit older. But if they are going to school, I really think that you need to jump on it right away and work and get them the help that they need to become a good reader right away, because you don't want the other kids that are in the same class to keep moving along and while they're not moving along with them. For two reasons, I think this is really important. The first is just the social emotional aspect. Your child is going to feel like they're dumb, even though they're not. Dyslexic people are very smart, and they have a lot of strengths. But when all the other kids are reading and it seems easy for them and they're not, they're going to feel dumb. And that's one reason why I would jump on that right away, so they don't feel that. And then second reason is that, the teacher has 20 kids in that classroom or more, and it is hard to, she has to move along with the whole class, and your child is going to be falling farther and farther behind. And then, maybe they will start getting pulled out from class, which is good, and they'll get some extra help. But it depends on what kind of a school you go to and how good the help is. Maybe they'll be able to catch up. But if many schools do not have the right help, that's just a fact of the way it is. And as they get older, it's less and less likely that they'll have the help that they need. Once they're out of elementary school, you're never too old to learn to read, but they probably will not be having the help that they need, even though they get pulled out of class. That's just a fact. So I just know that as the rest of the class is moving on and they're learning more and more things, your child may be left behind. And so that's why you would want to jump on that and work on it as soon as possible and not let them fall behind. Because dyslexia is not just being a late bloomer. It's actually a real thing with real differences in the brain, and you don't outgrow it. If you have dyslexia, you will need to be taught in a specific way that is direct, explicit, systematic, sequential, and multisensory. If you're interested in doing this yourself, maybe you're thinking, my kid is in a class that is not, they're moving too fast for my kid. My kid needs some extra one-on-one help. If you would like to, or you're homeschooling and you want them to get really good reading instruction, I have two recommendations for you for curriculum that you can use you can be successful teaching your own kid. And they are the Barton Reading and Spelling System and Really Great Reading. I think those two curriculums you can be successful with. If you are not interested in doing it yourself and you want somebody else to help you, you may want to hire a one-on-one tutor. And that's what I do. I do one-on-one tutoring online. So if you're interested in that, you can find all my contact information on my website, defeatingdyslexiawithdarcy.com. There's a link to it, of course, in the description. And also, on my website, there is a link that you can click that will give you a guide that tells what most people are expecting from kids that, like, by the time that they're finished with first grade. How would they be able to read by the end of first grade? How good can they read by the end of second grade? There's a guide on there that tells all of that, how your child is expected to do in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second, third, fourth, and also red flags to look out for. Because even though we know that kids progress at differently than the neighbor kid, and you don't have to be exactly like the neighbor kid, it's helpful to be able to see, like, what is expected and how, then you can know whether your kid is behind. And if you see the warning signs, then you might think, oh, this might be dyslexia. So get on my website and look for that free guide. That would be really helpful to you. All right. See you next week.